joining us on Savvy Senior Sources, Talking with Experts. Let's take a moment and hear from our sponsors, GWG Life and Reverse Mortgages SIDAC.
Provide for your long-term care. Convert your life insurance towards payments for long-term care. If you are concerned about future health care, you can convert your life insurance to pay for home care or assisted living. Health problems can be stressful enough without the added burden of financial obligations. If you feel that you no longer need your life insurance policy, you may want to apply the value towards long-term care.
Hi, I'm Beth Paterson, a certified reverse mortgage professional with Reverse Mortgages SIDAC. Mike and Carol decided that they needed a one-level home to fit their changing health needs. They used the reverse mortgage to purchase their new home instead of using conventional financing. This has benefited them greatly. Barbara decided to do a reverse mortgage to pay off her conventional loan that she was making monthly payments on. She had funds left in the line of credit after paying that off. And a year or so later, when she fell and broke her shoulder, she was able to tap those lines of credit to pay for her home care. As she said, she would have been up the creek without a paddle without the reverse mortgage. If you'd like information on how to receive security, independence, dignity, and control in your retirement years, contact us. Hi, welcome to Savvy Senior Sources, Talking with Experts. Savvy Senior Sources guides your way through resources A to V for seniors, boomers, caregivers, and their advisors. In addition to the TV shows, we also offer the Savvy Senior Sources Guide. Visit our website, savvyseniorsources.com, to get information on resources as well as on the guide. Today's topic is on caregiver stress, and I'd like to welcome back my co-host, Deb Nygaard from Arthur's Residential Care.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here again. Glad to have you. And our expert today is Vitaly Salo from Home Instead. So welcome for being here.
Thank you very much for having me.
Yes, and as we all know, caregiving is stressful, but there's a lot of resources out there, but some people don't even realize that they're a caregiver. So let's first review what is a caregiver.
Yeah, so it's interesting because I think in life in general, we have an identity, right? We start out life and we're an individual, then we get married, our identity changes a little bit. We have kids, our identity changes some more. We become not only a husband but a father. And so with caregiving, throughout life, there's that role kind of pops in and out. And most people don't really associate or really identify with that role. It's just, part of every day. Well, my kids get sick, we help, we deal with it. And so, especially when you're dealing with senior loved ones, it becomes a more pronounced role, and it's challenging, especially challenging with spouse caregivers, because the identity there is the spouse, and now, well, I'm still the spouse. I haven't stopped being the husband, but now I'm caregiving, and in the beginning or for part of it, if it's just a little bit, that's okay. But when it becomes more and more, people tend to start to lose that identity of the spouse a little bit, and they're identifying or not really identifying as a caregiver, but that's where some of that confusion comes in, because there's stress and there's all kinds of feelings that they're dealing with, and they're not really sure. They're feeling guilt over having some of those feelings. How can I even feel that way? This is right. And it doesn't really matter if it's your spouse or if it's your mom or your dad. Those things are there. So identifying as a caregiver is kind of that first step, and for a lot of people, they view it as like, well, if I had to quit my job and move in and deal with that I'd be a caregiver. But all I do is come over and do some grocery shopping, or, the occasional doctor's appointments and those kinds of things. So they don't really identify themselves as a caregiver. And it's really, anytime you're taking time away from yourself to do something for that person, it's different than we're getting together for a cup of coffee, because we're not helping that person.
Right,
We're
yeah.
just, it's a mutual time to enjoy conversation and enjoy something together. But when we're coming over because that person has some sort of a disability or needs some sort of assistance, and we're coming over, we're a caregiver. And so for caregivers to identify that and to say, you know what, I really am a caregiver, and whether it's a 40 hours a week caregiver, or 2 hours a week or 5 hours a week, they're still a caregiver.
Yeah. Talk a little bit about Home Instead, and your company is a home care company, but also your role with caregiving, because we're going to get into more of that as we go forward.
Home Instead Senior Care, we do in-home assistance for seniors, so we can come in and help with a variety of things. For some people, it's just a weekly visit to maybe get them out of the home a little bit, maybe do some grocery shopping and just a little bit around the edges. With others, we might be there 24/7, dealing with every little task and every care that the person has. And with many others, kind of somewhere in between there. But the idea is really to allow that person to remain independent wherever they call home.
Sure.
And so, kind of allowing people to have that dream of aging in place and staying where they want to stay, and not have to, be forced to move at some point. So in addition to just providing that direct care, our focus has always been really kind of, of course you've got the client that needs the care, but around the client you've got the caregiver, you've got the family, and they a lot of times are struggling. In the case of dementia, for example, the client sometimes really is kind of not really aware of what's going on, but everybody around is really struggling and dealing with all the stress, because they're trying to make sure that the person is safe, they have what they need. And so our goal is to provide support and resources, training, and just helping to equip families, and especially the primary caregivers, to make sure they know what they're doing and help them deal with the different stressors that they're going to be dealing with.
And help us understand some of the potential of the caregiver stress. And Home Instead has a website, caregiverstress.com, and with a lot of resources, and we'll reference those throughout. But let's talk about the potential of the caregiver stress.
Yeah, so stress is not only something that caregivers deal with. Stress is universal to life, right? We all have some stress going on. The uniqueness of stress for caregivers is that it kind of sneaks up on them. So if we go back, women, when they have children, when they're young, deal with stress. It's a life change, big life change, right? Seems like, why would a woman who's just had a baby, why would she experience depression? Or it doesn't make sense, right? But it does, because it's a big change in life, and you're going from maybe being just a couple to now you have a child, and you're now realizing you're going to have to devote a lot of time, you're going to have sleepless nights and all these kinds of things. But remember, you've had 9 months to prepare for it. It's an exciting thing that you're leading into. Now, if you're dealing with senior caregiving issues, if you're a caregiver, nobody plans to be a caregiver. Nobody goes, I cannot wait till the day
I'm that
I can be a caregiver, right?
Yeah.
So it just sort of happens, and most people kind of have it in the back of their mind. They can kind of see it. They see their friends dealing with it, and it comes up. But for a lot of people, it comes up, and they're kind of unexpected, even though it is expected. And then, especially when it's a lot, so we can deal with it for a week, for 2 weeks, but when it kind of becomes ongoing, it's like it just consumes that person. And how do you deal with that? And when you're not prepared, and all these, again, the different feelings that are there, and really a lot of confusion in terms of so what should I do, what's my role, who can I tell, and you're dealing with these things where people don't always share, don't always express those feelings, or talk to somebody about them. They're kind of hiding them in there, and when they're out with people, they're putting on a a brave face. Oh, I'm doing great, I'm doing fantastic, but on the inside, they're really not. And they're struggling with those things because, there's not a lot of support. And if there is support, they're not necessarily reaching out for it.
Something that's always intrigued me is capacity. I know Beth has a huge capacity to take on a lot of projects, and I don't have quite as big a capacity as her. Can you speak to that when it comes to caregiving?
Yeah, so I think, again, we're all a little bit unique, right? I mean, some can really manage and juggle a lot of things without a lot of stress, and others can't do quite as much. And the big issue is understanding yourself, is understanding, how much can I really do? Because the challenge with caregiving, especially with spouses, we see this is that, well, it's my lot in life, and I'll have to find a way to deal with it. And then they just kind of dive in without really going, okay, how much of this can I really handle? Because in reality, we can't handle all of it. Especially if it's dementia, if it's 24/7, if it's, depending on the situation, we can't handle all of it. So being able to be realistic to say, okay, I'm going to need some support. I'm going to need some ways to be able to bring in either some care for the person. I need some things for me. Again, in the Midwest, we're very nervous to say that we need something. It's kind of like,
Right.
well, wait, I don't want to be selfish. I need to be the caregiver. Well, no, I mean, as caregivers, I talk about our cell phones. You got to plug them in every night because they need to be recharged. We as people, we need that. We
good
can't
analogy.
just, keep going day and night and expect to be effective at whatever we do, because at a
Right.
certain point you kind of crash. And those are some of those, further issues with stress that it can bring on.
Yeah, and the cell phone plugging in is a good analogy. I know when my mom had a stroke and she was not able to do things, my dad was a caregiver for 3 years, and we were concerned about him and how that was going to impact him. Well, fortunately, he survived the ordeal longer than she did. She passed away before he did. But it was 3 years later, and he had a brain aneurysm. And so we're fortunately that didn't happen while he was taking care of his mom, but that could have. So that's why it is important to take care of yourself during that. And adult children, I want to touch on that too, because we've talked about spouses, but the adult children come in, and whether they're quitting their job or trying to juggle between their kids and being the caregiver, their parent, and we're doing some shows on those topics also, but they need to also take time for themselves, and that's
They
important.
do. And I think our, society's changed, so when you're talking to the generation that we're caring for now, they have a different view of the world in terms of, well, we dealt with things. We took care of our mom when she needed care, and they're correct, they did, but society's changed. We're having kids later in life, and so a lot of their children who are now the caregivers, they're not done with their, kids'
Right.
activities and all the stuff that they're dealing with there, and so now mom, dad needs help, needs assistance, but yet you've got all this stuff going on with school or other things. So they're kind of, sandwiched between the two, and there's a lot of stress there because, there's only 24 hours in a day, and you got to get some sleep, and then you got to, sports and everything else, because school has changed too. There's a lot of activity. It's not just go to school, come home, right? I mean, there's
Right.
a lot of sports and other things. So parents are really torn to run around and do a lot of things to kind of satisfy the needs of their kids. Well, now you've got the caregiver responsibility coming in, and how do you juggle that? What do you cut, right? Because
Right,
it's not
yeah.
like you can just add more hours in a day. You have to figure out something else.
Let's go.
I'm wondering what advice you have for those, the sandwich generation, the adult children. How can they say
Well-
no, or how can they acknowledge their capacity? Or,
So there's a couple of things. Number one, they have to be realistic, and I think a lot of times they're afraid because a person says, well, I don't want anybody else to come in. You need to figure out, you need to come help me. So sometimes they're kind of, that guilt is laid on them by the person that's receiving that care to say, look, mom needs you, I need you, you need to find a way to come over here. And so working through that, be able to say, look, I can do some things, but I can't do all of it. Involving siblings, involving others, so that certainly, this person might be right here, right near, and they are kind of tasked with dealing with all moms and dads' issues. But if there's more brothers and sisters, there's other things that they can contribute and they can do and they can help. And it's starting those conversations with mom and dad early to say, realistically, we have to look at this and how much can we contribute, and we need to look at beyond what I can contribute, because realistically, here are the things that I've got to do. Because a lot of times it's inside here, right? I know, but I don't want to make mom and dad feel guilty by telling them about all the things I got to do with my family, because
Yeah.
I don't want them to feel like, we're not important, but my family is important. But we do need to be honest, and we need to have that conversation to say, okay, I have to be here for basketball practice, I have to be there for this other activity. So for those days, I can't do anything, I can't come over. Maybe we could have somebody come out. Maybe we can get a professional agency to come in and provide some of the services. And some of the benefits of having a professional agency come in is really, the aspect of, allowing the daughter or the son to maintain more of that relationship versus coming over and just run around like crazy, get stuff done, leave, and you feel like you haven't even really been there. You haven't
had that chance to visit. Whereas having the professional come in and take care of the daily needs allows the child to still be the child and do that visit.
Correct.
And that type of thing.
And not everybody is super well equipped to be a caregiver. And I think understanding that too, and being able to say, look, my caregiving role is going to be limited to helping you get to the doctor. I'm not comfortable giving you a bath. I think we need to be okay with saying that if that's not who we are, if that's not, everybody is gifted differently. Somebody comes in, they have no problem with that. And one of the siblings may be that person and the other is not, but I think we do each other a better service if we're honest about those things, rather than just like, the anger that sort of comes out later, and we're feeling it, we're thinking about it, but we don't want to really say that because it's awkward to say that to our parents, that, I don't want to give you a bath.
And or siblings,
And
because
siblings, right?
sibling dynamics can come into play. One may have time to do some of that. One may live here and another's out of state. One may not have children and the other has children. But they can all play a role in some way or another, and it needs to be the family dynamics, respect for others, so that the kids who are saying, well, I'm spending all this time doing the caregiving, you're not doing anything. Well,
Lots of hard feelings then.
yeah, so they need to have, again, it comes back to the conversation, recognizing that different ones can do something. Maybe the one that's out of town makes the phone call to just check on them.
Yeah, there's things
Talk
that
about
can be
some other
done.
things
Yeah,
like
there's
that.
things that can be done from across the country. I mean, it's amazing. Technology has made many things possible now that,
Much easier.
long time ago weren't possible. But I think having that positive conversation with the siblings, with the family, to say, look, we all have a right to say, I'm not comfortable with some things. I can do some things. Here's what I'm willing to step up and do. And having that be a positive conversation rather than, nitpicking each other, because that's what a lot of times, and if it starts early with kind of the negative, it kind of continues, and it's hard to recover that and to bring it back to say, okay, let's all stop, let's just be adults, let's have, a positive way forward. It's better if we try to start that from the beginning with, a realistic expectation. And again, everybody's different. Everybody's life situation is different. So while one has a lot of time and can deal with many things, right now we're dealing with my wife's grandparents, and her aunt is devoting a lot of time taking them out, doing things with them. And she's voicing some things, she's saying some things, because there's 6 other brothers and 1 other sister. Why aren't more stepping in? Well, okay, I don't know the answer to that, but they should have a conversation as a group to say, okay, I can't force all of you to say you're going to come in for 5 hours, every other day to do some things, but let's figure out what we can each contribute, and make sure that whoever is leading that discussion isn't undermining or isn't belittling anybody else's effort, because those efforts are almost never, completely equal because of different many factors
Yeah.
of life situations and whatever else. So whoever's maybe from afar doing phone calls and setting up appointments shouldn't be made to feel very little for the little they contribute versus, well, I'm here, so I'm dealing with all these kinds of things. So, we should appreciate the fact that now I don't have to make those phone calls from here because I've got this person that can do that from that distance, and really encourage that positive, momentum forward.
A couple things, and if people are trying to figure out how to bring in services to give them the break, and that may equal out some of the sibling or that, or even for a spouse. Options are our sponsors, GWG Life, which is converting a life insurance policy into cash. I specialize in reverse mortgages. That's also an option to help pay for the financing of the care. And again, that's coming out of options that the parents may have, so then that can take some of that stress off, and they're not all trying to contribute financially.
And
because
that works even if the spouse is still living in the house, right?
For a reverse mortgage, it needs to be the primary residence of at least one of the homeowners.
Right.
A life settlement can work even if they're moving into senior housing, whether both are moving or one is moving.
Okay.
So so both can do that.
So there's options, yeah.
Yeah.
And
So
there's other ways to get a break too for the caregiver, 'cause there's like day programs or something. Can you talk
adult
about
aid
that?
services are a great concept, and somewhat like home care. They're still a little bit, I think, underutilized. And the idea of adult daycare is basically, rather than bringing services in or rather than moving a person to a building, you're bringing a person, just like it sounds, you're bringing them for care just for the day. And whether it's every day of the week, during the week, or just a couple days, but it's allowing that caregiver to get their break. It's allowing them to go, play golf or do lunch with friends or whatever else to kind of recharge their batteries a little bit. So great options. There's a lot of options, not to mention many options that exist through churches. We are in the Midwest. We always answer no. So when somebody says, "Hey, can I help you with something? Can I help?" No, I'm fine. I'm doing great. Accept that. When your neighbor or your friend says, "Hey, can I help you? Can I come over and stay with him or her for a little bit? Let you kind of get out." Take that. Say, "Oh, that would be just wonderful. Thank you so much for offering that." I know sometimes that becomes difficult to set up for a regular, ongoing thing, and depending on how much care the person needs, there's challenges there. But there's available options that are not necessarily even always paid, although, paid services are a great resource for, people move a person into a facility and they'll pay to have care there. Well, services are available to be brought in on many different levels, right where the person's at, and there's no long-term commitment too, so somebody can try that. With us, for example, it's a 7-day notice to terminate, so they try us, they don't think it's really a good fit, just give us a week's notice, and that's all there is to it. So
we only have a minute left, so let's talk about some of the resources that you have through Home Instead. Again, we'll mention the caregiverstress.com, but you have some other little booklets.
Yeah, so these are some examples of what we've produced to just kind of help families along that process. So I mentioned a few of them. So Returning Home is our newest one that we've put out, and this is the idea of helping the loved one that maybe lands in the hospital. Maybe it's the first time they're dealing with this. They're coming back home. Statistics say that 20% of those people that are going to the hospital, they'll right back within first 30 days of being discharged. So this is kind of a guidebook to just help them understand what are the most important things for them to watch for to make sure that person transitions back, well and safe. 50-50 is kind of what we talked about, the sibling relationships. It's indicative of that 50-50 split that really should be there. And also the 50 being kind of an age where you're probably going to start dealing with some caregiving issues. They might not be very big issues yet, but they're
Right.
going to be popping up.
Okay.
So it's the way to kind of start this conversations well with your siblings. And then 40-70 is about starting conversations with your senior loved ones, the 40 being the younger generation, 70, not when they need care, obviously, because at 70, there's not many people that really
Yeah.
need a lot of care. But it's, what do you want? How are we going to do this? Let's start making some real preparation.
The
realistic
discussion
plans.
early.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then avoiding hospitalizations as well. So, and there's a lot of information on caregiverstress.com. There's training videos. There's a lot of resources for caregivers to be able to access.
And one of the biggest things I think is don't be afraid to ask for help, recognize your limitations, and that will help. Great show, great conversation. Obviously, it could go on a lot longer. But thank you, Vitaly. Okay, I'm blotching the last name. Vitaly Salo from Home Instead, again, for being here and sharing your information and expertise. And thank you, Deb, for co-hosting and contributing to the conversation. And I'd like to take a moment to say thank you to our sponsors, GWG Life and Reverse Mortgages SIDAC, for making the show possible. And don't forget to visit SavvySeniorSources.com for information on resources and the resource guide. Thanks for joining us.
What is the secondary market for life insurance? The secondary market for life insurance is an emerging financial market that provides individuals options with their policies. These options allow policyholders to benefit from the value of their life insurance. Policies are sometimes a financial burden, especially for seniors, as premiums often increase over time. The secondary market offers financial alternatives that can help policyholders benefit from their life insurance now.
Hi, I'm Beth Paterson, a certified reverse mortgage professional with Reverse Mortgages SIDAC. Bob's wife passed away, meaning his Social Security income was cut in half. His financial advisor suggested he look into a reverse mortgage. With the reverse mortgage, he was able to take a dream vacation with his nephew, and oh, the stories that they can share. After Bob passed away, his niece shared the difference that it made to the whole family. Dorothy did the reverse mortgage in order to protect her other retirement funds. With her line of credit, she was able to travel, buy a new car, and do home repairs. Years later, she's still benefiting from the reverse mortgage line of credit and not having to rely on her children. For more information on how you too can have security, independence, dignity, and control, contact us.